There's a specific tension that rises the moment someone pulls out a camera. Maybe you're at a family gathering and everyone's gathering for a photo, and you suddenly need to use the bathroom. Maybe you're on vacation with friends and they want a group shot and you volunteer to be the one taking it. Maybe someone tags you in a photo on social media and your first instinct is to untag yourself before anyone sees it. And when people ask why you don't like photos, you laugh it off. You say you're not photogenic. You say you just prefer being behind the camera. You say it's not a big deal. But inside, there's something deeper happening. Something that feels almost like panic. Like being photographed means being captured. Being seen in a way you can't control. Being frozen in a moment you can't edit or escape from. And you'd rather disappear entirely than exist in that permanent, unchangeable image. Maybe you know this feeling. Maybe it's you. That person who has almost no photos of yourself from the last 5 years, who cringes at every picture someone takes of you, who avoids cameras like they're dangerous, who feels genuine distress at the idea of your image being out there, being looked at, being judged by people who don't know the story behind that expression, that angle, that frozen moment. You're not vain. You're not being difficult. You're experiencing something that goes deeper than preference. Something about being photographed feels like exposure, like vulnerability you didn't consent to, like evidence of your existence that you can't control. And in a world obsessed with documenting everything, with posting everything, with proving you were there through images, your avoidance feels like you're trying to stay invisible. Most people think photo avoidance is about vanity, about thinking you look bad, about being insecure about your appearance. But psychology tells a far more complex and layered story. For most people who avoid being photographed, the problem isn't simply disliking how they look. It's about what photographs represent. Permanence you can't change, evidence you can't erase. A version of yourself you don't control, frozen in time for anyone to interpret however they want. The discomfort doesn't come from thinking you're ugly. It comes from the loss of agency, from being turned into an object people can look at without your permission, from existing in a form that can be judged, shared, kept, or rejected, and you have no say in any of it. The camera doesn't just capture your image, it captures your powerlessness over how you're seen. Here's the part that makes selfie culture people uncomfortable. People who avoid photos aren't hiding from reality. They're protecting something sacred, the right to exist without being constantly documented, the right to be present without proving you were present through images, the right to be seen by people in person, in motion, in 3 dimensions, instead of being reduced to a flat, frozen, 2-dimensional version. They're not antisocial. They're not vain. They're reclaiming agency in a world that treats your image as public property, as something anyone can take, share, comment on, without considering how it feels to be the person in the frame, as evidence that you existed in a moment when maybe you were just trying to live it. Think about the last time someone took your photo without asking. Maybe they posted it before you even knew it existed. Maybe you saw yourself from an angle you never see. Maybe your expression was caught in a moment that doesn't represent who you are. Maybe you were mid-sentence, mid-laugh, mid-breath, and that split second got frozen as if it's the truth of you. And suddenly that image is out there, being looked at, being judged, and you had no control over whether it was taken, how it was framed, where it was posted, who gets to see it. That feeling? That's what photo-avoidant people feel every time a camera comes out. Not occasionally, constantly, like their consent doesn't matter, like their comfort is secondary to someone else's desire to document. This doesn't come from nowhere. It's often built from experience. The child who was photographed constantly by a parent obsessed with documentation learned that their image wasn't theirs, that their privacy didn't matter, that they existed for other people's photo albums, other people's social media, other people's need to prove they had a happy family. The child who was mocked for how they looked in photos learned that images are weapons. That being captured on camera means being vulnerable to ridicule. That every photo is potential evidence of your inadequacy that can be laughed at, shared, used against you later. The child who watched their photos used without permission, posted without consent, shared with people they didn't choose, learned that photographs are a loss of control. That once your image exists, it's not yours anymore. Somewhere along the way, avoiding photos became protection. If you're not in pictures, you can't be judged by them, can't be mocked, can't have your image shared without permission, can't exist in a frozen form that people can interpret however they want. If there's no photo, there's no evidence that can be used against you. No permanent record of a moment you'd rather forget. No image that contradicts the story you're trying to tell about who you are. Except, here's what that costs you. You're disappearing from your own history. When people look back at family gatherings, you're not there. When friends reminisce about trips, there's no visual evidence you were present. You're becoming a ghost in your own life story, not because you weren't there, because you refused to be captured. Here's what researchers discovered about this pattern. Dr. Shelley Turkle's work on digital identity shows that people who avoid being photographed often have what's called image anxiety. Not just concern about appearance, but deep discomfort with the permanence of photographic evidence. The anxiety isn't about whether you look good. It's about existing in a form that can be studied, analysed, kept, and viewed when you're not there to explain it. It's about being frozen in a single expression when you're actually dynamic. Being reduced to appearance when you're actually complex. Being turned into an object when you're actually a subject. The camera doesn't lie exactly, but it doesn't tell the truth either. It captures one fraction of a second and presents it as if it's who you are. We live in a culture obsessed with visual documentation, where experiences aren't real until they're posted, where memories aren't valid without photographic proof, where, if it wasn't photographed, it didn't happen. And if you're someone who avoids being in those photographs, you're seen as the problem, as difficult, as vain, as missing the point. But what if the culture is wrong? What if the constant need to document everything is actually preventing presence? What if being in the moment means not needing to prove you were there? What if your memory of an experience is more valuable than a photograph that other people can like? You're not hiding, you're living in 3 dimensions, in motion, in ways that can't be captured by a camera that reduces you to surface. There's a particular vulnerability in being photographed that photo-comfortable people don't understand. When someone takes your picture, they're taking a piece of you, not literally, but symbolically. They're creating a version of you that exists separately from you, that can be looked at when you're not there, that can be judged by people who don't know you, that can be kept by people you no longer want in your life, that can be shared without your knowledge or permission. And once that image exists, you lose control of it. It's out there, forever, existing on servers, in albums, on social media platforms that will outlive you, and you have no say in who sees it, what they think about it, or what they do with it. Behind every camera, avoidance is often hidden control needs. Not in a pathological way, in a protective way, in a world that constantly tries to define you, to categorize you, to reduce you to appearance and surface. Refusing to be photographed is an act of resistance. It's saying, you don't get to decide how I'm seen. You don't get to freeze me in a moment I didn't choose. You don't get to create a version of me that exists without my ongoing consent. It's reclaiming agency over your image in a world that treats images as free for the taking, as public domain, as something anyone with a camera has the right to capture. Here's where it gets complex. Sometimes avoiding photos means missing moments. Someone wants a picture with you specifically, and you refuse, and they're hurt. You're not in family photos, and years later, people wonder why you're absent. You have no visual record of important experiences, and part of you regrets it. The avoidance that protects you also isolates you, creates distance, makes you seem like you're not fully participating. And you're caught between two needs: the need to protect your privacy, your agency, your control over your image, and the need to be included, to be remembered, to have evidence you were present in important moments. And there's no good answer. Both needs are valid, both matter, and you're stuck trying to navigate a world that treats documentation as more important than presence. The question isn't whether you should be photographed. The question is, do you have a choice? Are you avoiding photos because you genuinely don't want them? Or because being photographed feels so unsafe, so exposing, so out of your control that avoidance is the only way to feel protected? If you can't be photographed, if even the idea creates panic, then your avoidance isn't preference. It's compulsion. It's fear running you. And the people who love you, they're not trying to violate you when they want pictures. They're trying to remember you, to have proof you were there, to look back someday and see your face in moments that mattered. Maybe healing doesn't mean loving being photographed. Maybe it means finding a middle ground where you can tolerate some photos in some contexts with people you trust, where you can negotiate consent, where you can say, "You can take photos, but please don't post them without asking me first," where you can participate in some documentation without feeling like your entire existence is being captured and owned by others. Not forcing yourself into every photo, but also not disappearing from your own history, not erasing yourself from the visual record of your life because you're so focused on protecting control. There's something that shifts when you realize avoiding all photos isn't protecting you, it's erasing you. When you understand that photographs aren't inherently violating, it's the lack of consent that's violating, the being posted without permission, the being shared without agreement, the being judged without context. And you can have boundaries around those things. You can say yes to photos with people you trust who respect your wishes about sharing. You can say no to photos that feel exploitative or performative. You can choose which moments you want documented instead of avoiding all documentation, because you can't control every outcome. So if you're someone who avoids being photographed, please understand this. You're not vain, you're not being difficult, you're protecting something that matters to you, your privacy, your agency, your right to exist without being constantly documented. And that's valid. In a world obsessed with images, with proof, with visual documentation of every moment, wanting to exist without that is actually radical. It's saying your experience is valid even without photographic evidence, that your memory is enough, that your presence mattered even if there's no image to prove it. But also, understand this: you're disappearing from your own story, and someday, when people look back, you won't be there. Not because you weren't present, because you refused to be seen. There will still be moments when someone pulls out a camera and your first instinct is to hide. When you feel that familiar panic rising, when being photographed feels like being trapped, that's okay. That's not failure. That's pattern that's been protective. It kept you safe from judgment, from violation, from loss of control. But notice what else it costs. The connection you miss by always being the one taking photos instead of being in them. The memories that exist without you because you were too busy avoiding the camera. The hurt on faces of people who want to remember you, but you won't let them. But there will also come moments when someone asks for a photo and you say yes. Your body might tense. Your smile might feel forced. The discomfort will still be there. But you'll do it anyway, and nothing terrible will happen. The photo will exist. Maybe they'll share it. Maybe people will see it. And life will go on. You won't be destroyed by being captured. You won't lose yourself by being documented. You'll just exist in that moment, in that frame, as evidence that you were there, that you were real, that you mattered enough to be remembered. And all the years you spent avoiding cameras will suddenly make sense. You weren't protecting yourself from photos. You were protecting yourself from being seen, from being vulnerable, from existing in a form others could judge. But being seen, that's not actually dangerous. It's just human. And the people who love you want to see you, want to remember your face, want proof that you existed in moments that mattered. And maybe, just maybe, you can let them have that. Not every time, not without boundaries, but sometimes, when it matters, when the person asking matters, when the moment is worth capturing even though it means surrendering control. That's not weakness, that's trust. That's being brave enough to be seen. And that's actually living.